Assalamu alaikum. In this tutorial, we are going to check the most interesting part of our brain. This is called limbic system. Before that, we have to understand how our brain or how when we get the information from the environment through the sensory system or respond to this information through the motor system, how we are actually engaged to the world around us, and how do we feel this world. So all these are called higher cortical function, and those functions are mainly influenced by a component of the nervous system. Those two major components are the hypothalamus and the two major components are the limbic system and the hypothalamus, and both of them are interconnected with each other and interpose with the information of the with new cortex between the endocrine, visceral, emotional process and voluntary response to the environment. So let us begin with the limbic system. What is the limbic system? Limbic system is not actually anatomical structure, rather than connection between or neuronal connection in different wide area of the brain. It is span all over the brain, extending from the frontal lobe, parietal, and temporal lobe. Okay. It consists of cortical part, okay, and deep forebrain nuclei. The limbic cortex or limbic system form a ring-like structure or lobe around the edge of the cortical mantle. Okay, this the mean limbic means the word limbic means edge or border, so it's a ring-like structure around the cortical area and above the Diencephalon, or around the Diencephalon and above the brainstem. The cortical part here is cingulate gyrus. This is the cingulate gyrus located below the cingulate sulcus here and above the corpus callosum, and it is actually continuous here with this part of the temporal lobe is called parahippocampal gyrus. Parahippocampal gyrus. The most anterior medial hook-like end of the temporal lobe is called the incus. It is the anterior end of the parahippocampal. Underneath the incus, we have the amygdaloid complex, or simply amygdala. Okay, and amygdala actually is involved in the emotional process. Okay, the emotional process and the basic drives. It is in this coronal section here. This is amygdala. Okay, this is amygdala. It's a complex of nuclei actually. Mainly is formed of 3 nuclei or 3 groups of nuclei. Okay, is located anterior to the or rostral to the frontal end of the inferior horn or temporal horn of the lateral ventricle. So it's this part here the temporal lobe. This area is the temporal lobe, and it is located in the medial part, just on the rostral end of the temporal horn of the lateral ventricle. The other deep structure of the limbic system is called hippocampus, and it is located in the inferior horn, the medial wall, or in the floor of the inferior horn of the lateral ventricle. Structure is called hippocampal formation. This anterior edge of the hippocampus, our expanded end, is called base hippocampi. The axons from the hippocampus formation is collect and goes backward and upward to form the fornix. The white fibers here tend to form this is called the corona of the fornix. Both structure here, those are the here is the corona of the fornix. Okay, as the body of the fornix, and then the fornix swing around the thalamus. So the thalamus is located just here. Can show you. So the body of the fornix is again swing around the or above the thalamus, and then descend anteriorly here, anterior to the hypothalamus region. To the hypothalamus region. Some fibers goes anterior to the anterior commissure and to end at the septal nuclei, and some fibers pass directly to the mammillary body. Here, as you see here in this green fibers, part that come directly where to the mammillary body as anterior column of the fornix. Anterior column of the fornix. Now, the formation from the mammillary bodies goes through mammillothalamic tract to the anterior nucleus of the thalamus and to the medial ventral nucleus of the thalamus. So, here in the temporal lobe, the most medial end of the temporal lobe, again, this is called the incus. Okay, it is the expanded anterior part of the parahippocampal gyrus. This parahippocampal gyrus, the expanded anterior end is called incus. Just underneath the incus, we have found the amygdala. So if we just dissect the brain at this point, or we took out the temporal pole here, okay, temporal pole, we have to find the amygdaloid complex at this point here. Okay, here the part of the amygdaloid complex. Then if we move or dissect more posteriorly, we go through the inferior horn of the lateral ventricle, or temporal horn of the lateral ventricle. And if you see here, this bulge in the medial wall is called the hippocampus, hippocampal formation. Okay, this hippocampal formation, you can see this dark area here. This is the part of the hippocampal formation. Okay, the hippocampal formation actually is not a single identity. It is mainly three structures. Those are subiculum. This here is called, this part is called subiculum, and then we have here, I think is this part in this area is clear, and this is the dentate gyrus. Dentate gyrus, and the closer from above downward is the hippocampus itself. But simply is all of them are called hippocampus, and this is for memory processing. This is for memory processing. Again, fibers or axons from hippocampus are collected to the fornix. So this part here is fornix, okay, and those are again goes to the mammillary body, and from the mammillary body to the anterior and medial ventral nucleus of the thalamus. So in this coronal section, we can demonstrate most of the core limbic lobe. Those are cingulate gyrus. Here is a cingulate gyrus. This is cingulum, the fibers that enter to the cingulate gyrus, and you can find it just above to the corpus callosum. This is body of the corpus callosum. So above to the body of the corpus callosum, we found what? Cingulate gyrus. And then this is the fornix. This is fornix or anterior column of the fornix. And then here on the temporal lobe, this is the temporal lobe. Okay, so in the temporal lobe, just on the medial floor of the temporal horn of the lateral ventricle, can find the hippocampal formation. The hippocampal formation, or simply hippocampus, with it is 3 components: subicillum, dentate gyrus, and hippocampus. Starting from the epithelial, neuronal epithelial of the roof of the nasal cavity, the bipolar neurons that regenerate the olfactory or the olfaction, the fibers transmit through the cribriform plate of the ethmoid bone, and to enter the olfactory bulb in the inferior surface of the brain. This is called olfactory bulb, located at the inferior surface of the forebrain. Okay, this sulcus is called olfactory sulcus here. This under the olfactory bulb and olfactory tract. So the fibers synapse within the olfactory bulb, and then coming off from this bulb as olfactory tract, traveling backward and downward here, down here. This is divided into lateral and medial stria, olfactory stria. Okay, and it ends on the primary olfactory areas. This is the second synapse in the primary olfactory area over here, just cover in the cortex cover or the ankles, and here in the frontal lobe, the area just near to the internal carotid artery, and this area is called anterior perforated substance, As we know, olfaction has nothing to do with thalamus. Instead, from the primary area, the olfactory goes to the association olfactories area that located in different lobe of the cortex. Again, those area, we have here the rectus gyrus here in the frontal part. This is called rectus gyrus. And also we have in the temporal lobe here, we have the rhinal gyrus. In this part of this tutorial, we will present the deep nuclei within the forebrain. Those are collectively known as basal ganglia. So the basal ganglia are deep gray matter within the cerebral hemisphere, are located lateral to the diencephalon. So if we open the brain or the cerebrum, here is corpus callosum. Yeah. So at this part here, this is insula actually. This gray matter here buried in the lateral sulcus or the sylvius sulcus is called insula. So here from outside to inside we found insula, and then we can find the basal nuclei. This one, this is lentiform nucleus, and from its name, see the shape is like a lens. It's called lentiform nucleus. The outer part here is called putamen, and the inner part here is called globus pallidus. Actually, globus pallidus is further divided into internal and external segment. So then moving inward, okay, just medial to the internal capsule. This is internal capsule. So just medial to the internal capsule toward the medial aspect, we found here the other basal ganglia. This is called the caudate nucleus. Caudate nucleus, actually one of the C-shaped structure in the brain. Follow the curve of the lateral ventricle. This is the head of the caudate nucleus. The head of the caudate nucleus. And here is the body of the caudate nucleus, and this is the tail of the caudate nucleus. So from the frontal lobe to the parietal lobe and then to the temporal lobe of the brain. To present the other part of the basal ganglia, you can demonstrate here in the coronal section. So from outside to inside, just underneath the insula, this is the insula, this is a lateral fissure, so this is the insula. You can find here this strip here, this strip-like nucleus is called colostrum. Then we found this lens-shaped structure or nucleus. This is called lentiform nucleus, and lentiform nucleus is formed of two parts. The outer one is called putamen, the inner part is called globus pallidus. As you see here, it's very clear that the globus pallidus also it is divided into external segment and internal segment. Basal ganglia is subthalamic nucleus here. This is subthalamic nucleus. You can easily find the subthalamic nucleus when the section, the coronal section show the red nuclei, just goes up laterally and medial between the thalamus and the internal capsule here. You can find this slit, or just it is a lens shape actually. Also it is lens shape, small lens shape. It's called subthalamic nucleus. Other part of the basal ganglia, or functionally part of the basal ganglia, but is anatomically related to the midbrain. This area here is called substantia nigra. Substantia nigra of the midbrain is functionally part of the basal ganglia. Again, from outside to inside, you have here the colostrum, you have the putamen, the globus pallidus, internal segment, external segment. Also here, you can find the caudate nucleus. At this point here, this is the body of the caudate nucleus. Okay. Same structures of the basal ganglia appear when we move just a little bit backward. Okay. Here the body of the caudate nucleus, and actually when it goes backward and turn and curve above the thalamus and come downwards to the temporal lobe, at this point here, if you see this gray matter here, this is the tail of the caudate nucleus. This is tail of the caudate nucleus on the lateral wall of the inferior horn. Okay, again this is the lentiform nucleus. So those structures are related to the internal capsule, external capsule, and the extreme capsule. Here, this is the internal capsule. This white fibers here is the internal capsule. As we know, internal capsule consists of many parts. It is between the head of the caudate nucleus and the lentiform nucleus. It's between the caudate and the lentiform nucleus, and here is the posterior limb. Actually, in the coronal section, we can't see the exact or the parts of the internal capsule. Okay, we can demonstrate it clearly, the different part of the internal capsule in the transverse section. We'll show it later. So this is internal capsule. Here, mainly this is a posterior limb because it is located between the thalamus and the lentiform nucleus. Outer to the lentiform nucleus, this strip, white matter here, is called external capsule. It's called what? External capsule. And then outer to the colostrum nucleus, this strip white matter between the colostrum and the insular cortex is called extreme capsule. The extreme capsule. This is transverse section through the head, okay, or through the cranial cavity. This is frontal lobe. Here is occipital lobe. Okay, this opening, or this is the superior sagittal sinus. Now, we want to demonstrate the basal ganglia, and as I told you, here we can see the different parts of the internal capsule, okay, extending from the anterior limb, posterior limb, and the retrolenticular part. Okay, anterior limb, posterior limb, retrolenticular part of the internal capsule, which give rise to the optic radiation. Okay, so this is optic radiation here, going to the calcarine sulcus. Here is head of the caudate nucleus. This is very large here, head of the caudate nucleus, and this is the frontal horn of the lateral ventricle. You can see here these two structure here. Those are the columns of the fornix. These anterior columns of the fornix. Okay, this is the thalamus, and here is the lentiform nucleus. Splenium of the corpus callosum. This is splenium of the corpus callosum, and also here this is the crura of the fornix when it comes out from the hippocampus. The prosencephalon is give or further develop into telencephalon and what we call diencephalon. Okay, the telencephalon, it gives the cerebral or the cerebrum to cerebral hemisphere, and the diencephalon here, the diencephalon group of structure lie or buried within the cerebral hemisphere. Okay, like this. If you look here, it is buried or midline structure that buried deep in the cerebrum. Again, this is reflect the rapid growth of the telencephalon compared to the slowly growth of the diencephalon parts. During the development, it is slowly developed. Okay, and that is why it's buried within the cerebrum. Now, coming to the parts of the diencephalon is mainly gives 4 or 5 parts. Those are thalamus, hypothalamus, epithalamus, subthalamus, and metathalamus. Okay, now the largest part of this again is called thalamus. This ovoid structure here is called thalamus. Okay, this is called thalamus. Is a group of nuclei that connect with different parts of the brain. Here, okay, the anterior end. Okay, the anterior end of the thalamus is narrow to form or part of the borders of the interventricular foramen, while the posterior end of the thalamus is expanded to form the bulvinar of the thalamus. Okay, we know that both thalami form the lateral wall of the third ventricle. If we take close look here, okay, close look. This is slit here. This is slit between the two thalami. Midline slit between the two thalami is the third ventricle. Okay, so each thalamus forms the lateral wall of the third ventricle, and as we know, also it is formed the floor of the lateral ventricle. The second part of the diencephalon is hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is a group of structure located beneath the thalamus. Okay, those are from anteriorly in the optic chiasm. We have the tubercinarium. Okay, tubercinarium, and then we have the infundibulum. The infundibulum, which connect the hypothalamus to the pituitary stalk. So here at this position, we have to find the pituitary gland within the cella thyrsica. So it connects to the hypothalamus through stalk here. Okay, this stalk is open to the infundibulum of the hypothalamus. Then behind that we have the mammillary bodies. We have mammillary bodies are two midline structure, okay, made the posterior end of the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus, it is separated from the thalamus by hypothalamic sulcus. So this line here, or this sulcus, is called hypothalamic sulcus. Hypothalamus is underneath this sulcus and above to the brainstem. As we know, hypothalamus, it is again developed from the diencephalon, so it is structurally part of the diencephalon, but functionally actually it is connected to the limbic system, or part of the limbic system. When observed from below, the hypothalamus is seen to be extended here, just behind again the optic chiasma, here behind the optic chiasma, and laterally you see it is enclosed by the optic tract. Okay, so here we have the infundibulum. Here this is the infundibulum, okay, and this is tuber cinereum, and then we have this, both of these are the mammillary body. Those are the mammillary bodies of the hypothalamus. The third part of the diencephalon is what we call epithalamus. Epithalamus. Epi means above. So here at this point, just above to the midbrain, okay, this part here is called epithalamus. Epithalamus consists of three structures. Mainly it consists of three structures. The midline bulge here, this midline bulge is called pineal gland. It's called what? Pineal gland. It's midline bulge. Okay, this, and also we have two nuclei located at the posterior superior corner of the third ventricle. The posterior, if at this corner here laterally of the third ventricle, and on the other side, from this side, we have the another corner, or the another wall of the third ventricle. At this point here, we have a nuclei called hypenula. So we have two hypenular nuclei, one in this point and one in this point. The connection between two nuclei is a commissure called interhypenular commissure. Interhypenular commissure. This form a part of the epithalamus. So again, epithalamus is three structure, two hypenular nuclei and interhypenular commissure, and then at this point here in the midline we have what? The midline swelling, or the pineal gland. The metathalamus is actually is formed of medial and lateral geniculate body of the thalamus. It's a small bulging attached to the posterior end, or to the bulvinar of the thalamus. Those are the lateral geniculate body here, over here. This is a lateral geniculate body, and this is a medial geniculate body. You can follow the optic tract actually posteriorly, and you find it to end here at the lateral geniculate body. Okay, again this is medial geniculate body. It's clearly just above to the superior colliculus of the midbrain, superior and lateral to the superior colliculus of the midbrain. In this coronal section, you can observe the part of the diencephalon clearly. Here is the thalamus, this bulge here, thalamus. Okay, very interestingly, you can see the anterior nucleus of the thalamus here. This bulb is anterior nucleus of the thalamus. Also, this area is hypothalamus. This is hypothalamus. Okay, See here, this is optic tract. So this is hypothalamus. If you look carefully, you can see this nucleus here. This is this nucleus. We can look it, can find it in more in a very clear section. This here, this nucleus here, this is subthalamic nucleus. This one is just medial to the internal capsule at the lateral part here for the red nucleus. This is the red nucleus of the midbrain. So this gray matter here, the subthalamic nucleus. Okay, so again, this is thalamus. Okay, this is subthalamic nucleus. In this, when we go backward, little bit backward, we can demonstrate the medial and lateral geniculate body. This is lateral and this is medial geniculate body of the thalamus.